Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel, welcome to my overview of Serum. So for those not across it, the way I do overviews on this channel is I just have a look at the first 2 hours of game. That's the Steam refund window. Steam reckons you can make up your mind about whether you want to keep a game or not, or refund it. And I tend to agree. Generally speaking, 20 hours in, you're probably not going to change your mind about what you thought 2 hours in. And this also allows me to triage what I will and won't review going forward. So yeah, a short punchy video, we'll keep it around 10 minutes and I'll give you the broad strokes so maybe you can find out if you're interested. Also, if I don't make it to the 2 hours, which is unusual, but there are exceptions like this game, I will tell you why. I put the keyboard down at an hour and a half because, and this actually conflicts me, like I can't think of another game that's really done this to me. This is really cool. There's some really cool ideas in here. I'm quite taken with the concept. It's sort of like Crank meets Out of Time. There you go, some movie touchstones. You're on a sort of death timer and you have to keep crafting this serum and injecting it into yourself to keep going. There's like a toxicity bar and, you know, a lot of the concepts are really cool, but in execution, it's actually messy to the point where it's not fun to play. And look, I look at a lot of different games, and I'm generally pretty open-minded with early access. And while there's some buggy mess stuff in here, which is definitely the sort of, well, I still think unacceptable, but you know, people's mileage varies with early access. I think a lot of people want games to be good, so they give them a pass. And this game will probably fall into that category. But it goes beyond just simple bugs and things that can be fixed. There are some sort of conceptual fundamentals that just really don't work and work against you. So worth your time, worth your money? I don't know about that. Really cool idea, and I'm curious what they do with it during development. But again, and not to sort of go too circular, I do wonder if some of the stuff, the decisions, the negatives in here are kind of baked into the concrete, into, you know, in the foundations. Not something one can easily patch and fix in early access. So yeah, conceptually it's kind of cool. Storytelling is very messy, very much learning the wrong things from Souls-like storytelling. And we talked about this on a video not that long ago. FromSoft is kind of mastercraft at doing sort of curious paper trail storytelling. Like it's enough to keep you interested and compelled and curious. And most casual normies playing, you know, a Dark Souls or whatever, self-included for the most part, will get value out of it and broad strokes, but you won't necessarily understand the full depth of the story. But it's there if people want to really go diving, and that's why you have entire channels dedicated to Dark Souls lore. So they get the idea, but the problem is a lot of pretenders that don't actually understand the sort of ethos underlying the breadcrumb trail storytelling, and they just copy it by saying, well, we're gonna create a bunch of disjointed logs that are mysterious and not forthcoming with all the information, but they sort of miss that there's actually quite a bit of an art that FromSoft has kind of mastered. So this game is trying to do the same sort of thing. So what's really going on? It's not super clear. There's some sort of virus. I think your dude has immunity. There's an opening cutscene, and again, that's too vague in the worst way. Like your kid's sick and you're part of an experimental program, and I don't know, something goes wrong. You're on your way back from being in test facilities and all of a sudden now you wake up in a totally different environment. Like, is this even the same world? You're in some overgrown place. Again, the game is doing itself a disservice. It thinks it's being clever, it's really not. So you're sort of going around picking up scraps and there's a dude talking in your ear trying to tell you what to do, and from what I understand, you have some sort of immunity, but there might be some cover-up, and the idea is that maybe the government's trying, or the organization in charge of the serums are trying to kill you off because they don't want the public to know that there is an immunity strain. So again, it's not very well constructed, and it's not delivered super well. But yeah, so great thing on the box in the elevator pitch, really cool, and that's what got me through the door, and that's what probably will get a lot of people through the door. But then once you get your hands on it, it's a bit rough. You've got like a base, and you've got this thing injected in your arm where you've got 2 minutes, which gets paused when you're in the base, and there's like a cleansing machine that can reset your timer, right? So you've always got this 2-minute tether, and the idea is that you craft these serums, and it's actually got a pretty clever concept that you can compound different bonuses as you level up, and the only way to level up is make more serums. So you can sort of put 3 different buffs together And they kind of have a toxicity meter associated with them. Reminds me of Witcher type games. So the idea would be that you load up, you build a couple of serums. There's a ceiling to how many you can take, but you can't really take more than 2 per run, let's say, because the toxicity meter gets too high. That might change with upgrades and all that, I don't know. But you do your run and you sort of go out, and your motivation for the most part is to try and follow the paper trail of these little disjointed quests about trying to figure out what's going on. And again, it is one of those things where the devs spent too much time with their own build and they haven't farmed it out to people enough, so they seem pretty convinced that their story is really interesting and compelling and finding out what these characters are doing, and it's really not. And then you realize like all your base has already pre-built stuff, so there's no base building or anything like that. There's these little facilities like hydroponics for growing and crafting benches and that sort of stuff, but again, it's actually fairly limited what you actually do with these things. You can build a couple of things, and it's incredibly fiddly. There's no like move all into your storage. You have to click each thing individually. There's no control shift click or anything like that as well. So you literally have to click on one thing at a time and click move. Same goes for the hydroponics. You put the plant in, you move. I'm using my hands, but you're clicking on the plant, then you're clicking the accept button, and you do that bloody 10 times or 9 times. And in a game like this, where that's sort of crafting, interfacing, managing loot, it's expected that you get that shit right. Now, maybe that can be patched, but I don't know if it will be, because so much of this game seems to be trying to emulate, Crank, the idea that you're under the pump. The soundtrack, at first you will go, oh, that's really cool. There's some sort of tick-tock. They're working time in, tick, 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 tick into the soundtrack. Then you realize that it's not so much a dynamic track as it just keeps going. And then even in the time that I've spent with it, I'm so sick of it, and it's not reacting to environment. Having said that, there is some stuff that does, like when combat kicks off, there is like the track gets more intense, so there is a dynamism there. But my point is that the ambient track is kind of high intensity, and I understand what they're doing. They're trying to keep that timer ever present in your mind. But it's actually quite exhausting and frustrating. And then when I look at these mechanics of like managing inventory and moving things from boxes being a fucking nightmare and pain in the ass, I start to realize this is all intentional. So I will be curious if there's like overwhelming backlash, because there will be, for sure. People will not be happy with having to move each thing bloody individually at a time, especially when you come back from a run and you've got friggin' 200 things in your inventory. I mean, even at least, meet the people halfway and patch it so that when you're in your headquarters where the timer is paused, so there's no pressure there, that you can move your stuff around. But yeah, like the upgrades seem to be sort of just not that interesting, and there's a salvaging system, but some of the things you don't want to salvage, but some of you do, and it's not really obvious what you do and don't want to keep, and the combat's clunky and messy. You can do like charge attacks. I've unlocked a spear, and for some fucking reason, the charge attack for that is like this locked double jab animation, which has gotten me killed at least once fighting like wolves or whatever, where like you try and get that jab, but you're locked into the second animation jab and it pushes you past the actual animal hitbox. So it's like, what the fuck is the point of this? So you wind it up, you charge it, you let go and hit, but the second hit just launches you past the dude and he bites you on the bum. And also other things like there's no map, and that's fine. And again, using the Souls touchstone, right? Souls games don't have maps, but that's because they have distinct and interesting environments. They become, sort of memory navigable. And I'm not against that, and in many ways that sort of design is probably preferable to a map. But in this, the environment is just so fucking the same. Everything's green and dusty and like, yeah, okay, there's an artistic cohesion, but it's all samey, and you're not giving me a map. You're putting a timer on top of me. So the point is, I think all that stuff is actually intentional. They've intentionally done what I would call bad gameplay design decisions, because they're intending to ramp pressure and lean into the Serum timer concept. But that doesn't make it okay. So like, you could argue that it's cohesive, right? Like everything is designed to make your life unpleasant in relation to having limited time, so that you get lost, you get confused, you get stressed, that sort of stuff, but that does not make for a fun experience. I feel like in better hands, this may have been done more deftly. And that's sort of, I don't want to rant too much more, but that comes back to my initial point. I feel like a lot of people are going to say, why don't you have a lot of this quality of life stuff in here that's expected? And I think, again, this is all speculation, but I really think this is not an accident. This is intentional, and perhaps the developer would fancy themselves a bit of an auteur. They're trying to do something, but shoot your shot, but not all game devs are made equal. Anyway, this sounds cruel and bashing, but we'll see how it goes. I could be totally off base and wrong, and who knows, maybe it spends some time in early access getting, better and fixed. But at the moment, I don't want to play it anymore because it's unpleasant to play. It seems intentionally unpleasant to play. And I'm pretty sure it's less a case of Scarlett just doesn't like being under pressure, because I kind of love pressure in games. I love difficult things. And more that I just feel like they could have done this better. But we'll see. Team, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.